Moonlight Peaks has been on my radar ever since we first got a teaser trailer over 2 years ago. And this caught my eye as it was a farming sim with a little bit of a difference, seeing you play as a vampire descendant to Dracula, meaning that not only would you be waking up at the dead of night to start your daily farming sim chores, but the world that you live in is also filled with a bunch of other fantastical creatures. And even though I've played every single demo this game has come out with, and I even went to Gamescom, which had their own exclusive demo showing some gameplay that we have never seen before, after playing this game for just over 6 hours, I can honestly say this game really took me by surprise. And a huge shout out to Marvelous for sponsoring this video and allowing me to be able to play this game ahead of release to tell you everything you need to know. Now, I do want to make this very clear, this is not a review, because if I'm being honest, playing this for 6 hours is by no means enough for me to get anywhere close to reviewing this game. But hopefully this video will give you a little bit of a better idea about what this game actually is. And just to know, all the footage and the gameplay that I'm showing you is all captured on PC. But the game will also be coming to Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2 at launch as well. Now, because I had already played the demos before, I thought I had a pretty good grasp about what Moonlight Peaks actually was. As in this game, playing as a vampire does have a couple of benefits, although you most definitely will not be seeing the sun anytime soon in this game. But that's made up for by the fact that you can not only use magic spells to help you out with your farming, and the fact that you can actually transform into different animals to help you with your farming sim duties. But the one thing the demos never let us explore was the town and its characters. And this might actually be the thing that makes Moonlight Peaks stand out the most, as the driving force to nearly everything that you do is actually its story. And whilst these aren't full-on cutscenes, they still have an awful lot of character, which I wasn't expecting. And more importantly, this gives everything that you do a purpose, which has been the thing I've really been looking out for in farming sims lately. Now, before you actually get into the game, first we have the character creator. Which, like with any good farming sim, this took me far too long to actually decide how I wanted my character to look, but thankfully there are quite a lot of options to choose from. And do be warned, this is also the stage where you get to name not only your character, but also your farm and your pet hell kitten as well. So if you don't want to be stuck in the character creator menu for an age, I definitely have a little think about what you want to name your cat and your farm now. Now, the game itself begins with you running away from home after an argument you had with your father, Dracula. And you decide to take the train to the town of Moonlight Peaks, with nothing more than your trusty coffin and your hellcat by your side. And luckily, this is a town which your father used to have some business in, so you actually have somewhere to stay, albeit in desperate need of some TLC. And even though your home is definitely in a state, the town itself is actually pretty great and surprisingly big, as not only is it made up of the main town itself, but it also has a couple of different areas that you can explore as well, including beaches, marshes, and of course all of the residents' homes. And after exploring for a little bit and talking to some of the residents, it becomes pretty clear that not all the residents are that excited about the fact that you've decided to make Moonlight Peaks your home. And it turns out this hate is more than warranted when you find out your dad might have something to do with all of the problems that Moonlight Peaks is experiencing now, because this town is in desperate need of some help. You see, the town itself is kind of split into different family groups. You have the vampires, the werewolves, the witches, and the seers. And with many of the residents stuck in their old ways, no one is really doing much to help one another. So it kind of falls down to you to fix everything. And this is largely what the story revolves around, as your quests and side quests largely revolve around helping different villagers with their issues. And your classic farming sim loop is kind of broken up by trying to complete these different missions. Now, some of the quests that you're given are a lot more farming sim related than others. As for example, your very first quest that you're set is by a vampire named Eeowna, who very drunkenly asks you to make him some wine. But some of the other quests that you'll do is more so just talking to other villagers, getting information and asking them for help. Now, I love having a story in a farming sim, not only because it gives everything you do a purpose, but it's also such a fantastic way to add depth to some of the characters. And I feel like in Moonlight Peaks, they've done exactly this. As you get to know not only more about the characters and how they react to different situations, but you also get to learn a lot about their relationships with each other. So everything you learn about the world and its history is largely through these conversations between the characters. Now, obviously, this being a farming sim, farming is a large part of what you'll find yourself doing. And the farming sim mechanics, at least at the beginning, are more or less what you expect. And I do appreciate the fact that the game gets you into the farming sim mechanics pretty fast, handing you all the tools at once and basically just telling you to get to work. And this definitely feels like a game made for those of us who have played a farming sim before. I also very much like the fact that the tools themselves don't take up any room in your storage, and they're accessed through this tool wheel, which is my personal favorite way to do tools in a game when I play with a controller. And then you can do the usual things like tilling the soil with your shovel, planting the seeds which you can buy from a little shack in the woods, and watering them. But where things start to get interesting is when you can use your vampire abilities. So I was able to get far enough to unlock my very first spell, which allowed me to water my crops with magic. And I also unlocked my first transformation as well, allowing me to change into a hell kitten. And honestly, this turned out to be such a good quality of life feature. You see, the Hell Kitten not only lets you till the soil while using a lot less energy, but it also allows you to run around a lot faster than you can as your normal vampire self. And considering not only how big this town is, but also how many quests that will simply be traveling to different people or different areas, unlocking the ability to run faster was absolutely fantastic. When you're not farming, you'll actually find yourself doing anything from fishing, which thankfully isn't all too difficult, catching bugs, visiting the mines, or taking on one of the many additional quests that I came into, even just at the beginning of the game. Now, one of the tasks that we were set was to try and find 100 of these chicken-like creatures called vampsters, which are scattered all around the area, and you have to bring them back to the mines. In my 6 hours of playing, I found 5 of these, so they're very cleverly hidden. And another one of these challenges was to find 100 of these skull head type things, which were called soul blobs. And once you catch them, you actually figure out how the person died. The really interesting part about this wasn't necessarily the quest itself, but it was the rewards. You see, after I caught 15 of the skull heads, I was rewarded with a watch-like thing that allowed me to slow down time, effectively meaning that I could make every single day in Moonlight Peaks longer if I wanted to, which does make me wonder what the other rewards are and if they are somewhat similar to this. And of course, you can also spend your time exploring, which is actually incredibly important as the game won't tell you where to go to start the next main story mission. Instead, you just need to run around the town and sort of stumble into the next cutscene that will start the next quest. Now, one thing I did notice pretty early on is that this is a farming sim where you will be doing a lot of processing. Just in the 6 hours I spent with the game, I had already made a processor, a furnace, and a keg just to get started, and all of which were needed for different missions. And it's safe to say that despite the fact this is pretty story driven, it won't be without its usual farming sim grind. As I found out that not only will you need a lot of resources which take time to make, but you'll also need a lot of money, as money will not only allow you to buy new buildings like a chicken coop, upgrade your house, and buy seeds, but it will also allow you to upgrade your tools as well. Another thing I was constantly running out of in the early game was energy. And this is where I think the cooking mechanic will really start to come into the game later on. But in my first 6 hours, I didn't really make enough crops to cook anything fancy, and I was too broke to go and buy food, so I wound up making grape juice instead to try and get my energy so I could make the most out of every in-game day. But again, the thing I really liked about the farming sim mechanics was just the fact that everything I was doing had a purpose. Either I was trying to make money in order to get the next upgrade for my farm, or I was directly making stuff I needed for some of the in-game quests. So I always felt like the farming was in some way progressing me forwards in the game's story, and that I really enjoyed. I also didn't feel like my in-game days were rushed all that much. If anything, I actually felt like I didn't have enough to do in the first couple of days to fill the time. Although I do think this is largely because you unlock stuff through the story, so I think as you go, you're going to get a lot busier. Next up, let's talk quickly about the residents, as there are a lot of them. I think there's over 20 that I've seen so far. And I'd say a solid portion of them are living creatures. There's also a fair number who are ghosts and other stuff. Now, having this many NPCs does mean that the towns feel lively. There's always people walking around, and you can actually see where each person is on the map at any moment in time, which is a lovely touch. I also love the fact that you are not the only person who can run around in animal form. So for example, some of the werewolves will actually run around the town in werewolf form. Now, so far, as I mentioned before, most of what you know about all of the characters actually comes from the cutscenes. And in between those, when you run around the town and speak to the villagers, you tend to get 1 or 2 lines of text and then the option to give them a gift. And normally this text is quite generic. Unless you've had a special event or cutscene, then the comments tend to revolve around that instead. Now, in terms of dateable characters, so far I could see 15 of them. And truly, I think there is a person here for everyone. They've given us such a diverse lineup that deciding who to date is probably going to be one of the hardest parts of the game. Okay, next up, let's talk about the controls, as this can truly make or break a farming sim. Now, Moonlight Peaks is made to be played even on PC with a controller, which is perfect for me because that's my favorite way to play farming sims anyway. But I think they've done a really good job for the most part with the controller controls. They feel intuitive and easy to use. My biggest downside though, I think, is the map. As Moonlight Peaks does not have a mini-map, so you need to keep on bringing up the menu in order to get to the map. And the issue is it will often default to bringing up the quests instead of the map, which means that you are 2 button presses away from accessing the map whenever you need to figure out where to go. Which, as a directionally challenged person, can get a little bit frustrating after a while. Also, if you are a motion sick girly like I am, you'll be glad to know the camera is fixed. I know not everyone loves having a fixed camera, but I personally think they're great as I never get motion sick from having a game like this. Now, whilst I do feel like I did as much as humanly possible in the 6 hours I was given, there were a bunch of things that I just couldn't have access to in the game yet, as that would come later on. Like, for example, I got to run around the mines, but I hadn't got far enough in the story to figure out what this door was for and how to open it, and more importantly, see what's behind it. I also didn't encounter any combat whatsoever in the mines so far, but I don't know if that will stay true as I progress further. I also couldn't access the majority of spells that are in the spell shop, and in my time playing it, I didn't manage to get enough money to start raising animals either, so I'm not really too sure how those mechanics work in the game yet. And of course, I don't know a whole lot about the story, but I am glad I could kind of see what direction the storyline's going in, as I think the story is going to have a lot to do with just trying to unite the town as a whole, and helping each of the different factions out with all of their problems, bringing the town together. And I have been told by the developers that you can expect the story to be around 50 to 60 hours of content. One thing I only got to see a little snippet of was the game's events. The one I did get to see is called Lovage. And for this one, you could prepare a little bit beforehand by making a dish to bring for the buffet and also a present for your secret admirer. The island looked all decorated for it, and there were some exclusive items to buy as well. So we've basically covered everything that I've seen in the game, but I do think it's important to mention the stuff which I didn't see. Now, I do want to make clear this might just be because I didn't get far enough in the game, but there is also a chance the game might not just include any of these features. One big thing I didn't experience whatsoever was actually the relationship mechanics. Now, it is worth noting I did try my best with this. I made sure to try and gift villagers presents nearly every single day. I tried to talk to the villagers as much as possible, but despite all of this, none of the villagers had a single heart next to them. So this unfortunately means that I don't know a whole lot about relationships. I don't know if there's cutscenes when you level up, nor what will happen when you get married. Now, I did get some information from the FAQs where it states that you'll be able to make your spouse a vampire as well if you want to. But the FAQ does also mention that you won't be able to have children, nor is there any plan to implement this into the game. The other thing I want to point out is if a character is not involved in the cutscenes and doesn't come up much in quests, you won't really learn much about them just by talking to them each and every day. They just say one line, you get the option to give them a gift, and that's it. So this does heavily rely on the story for you to get to know each of the characters, which is why I really hope that there's cutscenes. Now, whilst we do know that the story will be about 50 to 60 hours worth, the other question is there much to do outside of the story, especially once you get to the point of actually finishing it? Now, there are a couple of mechanics in this game already set up that I believe are for late game. One of the big ones is actually the decorating. This game has not only a lot of decorative items that you can craft yourself, but also a pretty intricate decorating system. It kind of feels like Happy Home Paradise in Animal Crossing New Horizons, where you get a more top-down approach to decorating your farm, which is pretty big, so I think you can do some very ambitious stuff here. There's also some of the quests that I mentioned earlier on that involve you finding 100 different chickens or different skull heads that I think will occupy a lot of your time outside of the main storyline. But I am very interested to see if this is everything or if there's more late game stuff that will come in that will keep you playing well past the 60 hours. The final thing I am eagerly waiting for is to just see how this plays on the Switch and the Switch 2. As of right now, I don't think we've seen any gameplay of how this plays on the Switch or the Switch 2, because one thing I do really enjoy about this game is actually how it looks. I love the gothic aesthetic everywhere, mixed with the farming sim vibes. I think it works perfectly, and I really do hope the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch 2 version look somewhat close to what we're seeing on the PC version right now. But overall, I think I'm just excited for the game's release. Despite the fact that this wasn't necessarily what I expected after I played the demos, but sort of in the best possible way, as this is a farming sim that leans far more onto its story than I ever thought from the demo. And I can't wait to learn more about this game when it releases on July 7th. And by the way, if you want to see more upcoming Cozy Game releases, click this video here.